Coach Garrett here to talk about one of the most dreaded things in fitness and recovery, the foam roller. And I basically just want to improve your relationship with the foam roller, learn how to use it properly, and how this can not only help you boost in recovery, but it can also boost helping you form like a nighttime routine. This is something that I would call a toothbrush exercise, meaning that you can do it every day or maybe even twice a day. So this first one we're going to start out with is I like to start in my mid-back and my thoracic spine. And the reason being, a lot of my tightness from that sitting and anterior rotation, I come down. So we're looking for a landmark that's in your mid-back, below your shoulder blades to start. I like to keep my heels down and my toes pointed up. I'm going to bring my hands behind my head, and I'm going to do a little bit of reconnaissance. I've got my hips off the ground, and I'm simply just searching to feel where those areas of tenderness or tightness is. I've got a spot just below my shoulder blades. Now I'm going to allow myself to open my chest up, to pull those elbows back down, and to lengthen and expand the rib cage. And when I'm here, can I breathe into these respiratory muscles of the side? So just using about 4 breaths right there, I was able to get a little bit more thoracic extension. From here, I'm gonna do 4 crunches. I'm crunching up, I'm bringing those elbows together, I'm creating that little C curve the opposite direction. Now I'm gonna allow myself to open up and to reach. So again, the hips are down, I'm opening the chest, I'm allowing the crown of the head to fall back. And then back up, crunching those elbows together, creating that C curve. So this thoracic spine really is where a lot of our shoulder pain and stiffness and tightness comes from. It really limits that overhead mobility and flexibility. So those of us that are swimming, or even just after a long bike ride, sitting in the saddle for that long and getting crunched down, this thoracic spine is always the go-to. So we're looking for about 4 of those down and up. And now we've established a good range at the bottom. Once again, I'm gonna let my rib cage lift. Now you're gonna side bend side to side. So we always talk about we don't want bananas, meaning I don't want you curving. Can you truly stay side to side as if you're pulling your hip towards your elbow? Actually, I like the idea of that. Thinking about leading from the hip to engage those obliques a little bit. Once I've got 4 of those for each side, I'm then gonna let my arms go all the way overhead. Shake out that head, shake out that tension. And again, check in with those 4 breaths. I'm working on getting my arms as long as I can overhead. Now I'm gonna do 4 of these little jumping jacks or knuckle draggers. Can I keep my spine in that nice long line? Reach those arms all the way overhead. And once again, this can be used before a training session, after a training session, or even part of a nighttime routine. From here, we're gonna go a little more target specific into the lats. And so the lats a lot of times are hard to stretch because this meaty area behind your armpit, a lot of that stuff attaches in with your scapula right there. And it's very easy to get tight. So from here, you're gonna get your legs basically into a fetal position, and you always wanna use your arms to help you support. I like to use a hand behind my head to support the neck. That's a lot of the common mistakes. And at first, I think of everything in reps of 4 or 5. I'm just looking inside and out to notice where I have the most tenderness or tightness, because the goal isn't really to roll like I'm doing now. It's to find that spot, and my goodness, I've found it. Once you've found a spot, you want to sit on it for about 30 seconds. That's what truly makes it myofascial release. That idea of finding that spot where there might be a knot in your connective tissue or fascia, and then just putting that weight on it, that trigger point, that point, will allow it to release. Then once we've spent about 30 to 60 seconds on that trigger point, I like to go back to a little bit of light movement to see if it did release. And a lot of times you'll notice it will move around ever so slightly on you, but a lot of these muscles are rotational, they're diagonal, and you want to go with the fibers. So I loosened that spot up a little bit, but now I'm going to add a little thoracic reach. So now I'm going to use my left arm as a pillow. I'm going to reach that right arm as far as I can to the side, and I'm going to pull this bow and arrow back. Can I get that elbow almost all the way to the ground and then reach? The same idea is we're starting with the thoracic spine right here, because most of us do the legs a little bit, and we're most likely to neglect this part of your upper body. And I really think most of our back and shoulder pain comes from not having enough mobility here in this thoracic spine. And also this lat and all the time we spend sitting and on our devices is what really helps us. Same idea, working about 4 or 5, and that one is a little uncomfortable. So now I'm gonna kind of move around that backside kind of meaty area in between the armpit and the shoulder blade. Where do I have the most tension? Now that I've established where that tension has moved to, I'm gonna bring this top arm with my thumb up, and I'm gonna bring my hand all the way down. So once that hand comes down, it's gonna come all the way back up. It's another good opportunity to practice that breath, to get into that ujjayi, or that 5-second inhale or 5-second exhale. This breathing cycle is very popular in yoga, and then it also goes into what is called a coherent breath, or the heart mathy stuff. And you can feel where you need to go. Are you escaping that really most tender spot? And this one feels good. I'm getting a lot of release from this movement. So just going through these ranges of motion with the shoulders with the trigger point on that limiting factor. So now I've improved that overhead flexibility. And now I'm going to internally and externally rotate that arm. Rotating the thumb all the way up and back, and then coming all the way back down. The same idea, I'm on my spot where I have the most tension, where I feel the tightest, and where it hurts the most. The joke with the foam roller is that it hurts so good, and that is the best way of explaining it. All right, so I've gone a lot of the big directions where that lat might stick, and we'll go ahead and move over to the other side. Remember, we want to use joint stacking whenever we can to get into these positions. And right now I'm going to bring my hand behind my head, get my knees as high as my hips, get into a little bit of a fetal position, and we start with that reconnaissance. One time it's only about 4 or 5 rolls. It's foam rolling is what it's called, but really it's mostly about just foam sitting on that trigger point. And you can probably see those pain faces that I am making right there. Woo! Man. So this also gets really tight if you've taken a little break or time off from training. You'll notice you'll kind of shrink back down into your posture a little bit. This will help you feel significantly better if you have soreness from swimming. Okay, so now that I've sat on that motion, I'm going to begin to add that little bit of rotation on it. So I'm going to reach that left hand high, and then I'm going to pull that bow and arrow back. I'm releasing that right arm to use it more as a pillow, and so that I can get a little bit more of my weight. And when you first do this position, especially into these lats, it is very tender. So tread lightly. Your foam rollers, I prefer the ones that have the PVC and a little bit of texture on them versus just like the white foamy one. A lot of time those are not hard as you need to. So if you have any questions, throw them in your comments, or even in the Team Babe chat for those of you that are on the squad. All right, so I've got my 5 bow and arrows. Oh man, that one was super tender. Now I'm gonna bring my focus back to this right arm, and we're gonna chop this right arm down. I shift it down just a little bit. Woo hoo hoo. And there's why my pressings felt a little weird. Oh my goodness. It's been way too long since I've done this. And remember, this is one of those things that you could do every day, twice a day, but some people fall in love with it. Like, oh, I can't exercise until I foam roll. I still would prefer a dynamic warm-up versus doing this, but there's also nothing else like it. The big idea is if you keep your body and your connective tissue mobile and supple, it's more likely to stay that way. Don't let it get to that spot of soreness and tightness. Okay, so I've still got a little bit of tightness in there. And now we're gonna add that internal and externally rotate. So you're just rotating that thumb to point it down one direction and then all the way the other way. And that's what happens a lot as we reach in our swim stroke or as we roll. Also, as I keep mentioning, just undoing gravity. And the good rule of thumb is I always look at doing about 4 or 5 of each movement. All right, we really got that upper body. Let's go to the 2 most kind of beneficial highways. The goal is maximum gain, minimal strain. We want to do just enough to hit all of the major highways, but not take all of our time up. The next one, we're gonna get all the way on our forearms, so we're more into that side plank mentality. And then we're gonna cross that leg, right leg over so that we are in what I call a panther position. So now we're gonna do reconnaissance from your hip all the way down to your knee. When you're doing this reconnaissance, you're just looking again, areas of tightness, tenderness. Take an outside route, take an inside route. Where in this motion do you feel the most tension? I a lot of times get it right here in the middle. Whew. All right, I found that spot. We're gonna start with just the sitting. I hear lots of complaints of my neck or my shoulders in these positions. Notice how much I'm trying to get my shoulder right over my elbow and keep my head over there. Not that it's falling forward. Always thinking about your posture, then checking in your breath and finding that soft body behind it. So when we're sitting on those trigger points, putting as much weight into them as we possibly can. I'm almost leaning into the ground, getting all of my weight in there. Again, 30 to 60 seconds sitting on these trigger points. You'll also identify where your kind of common spots are. After cycling, my calves, my hip flexors, my quads are really tight. After running, my IT bands, the side of my legs and calves are really tight. After swimming or after inactivity, that thoracic spine can get tight. So I look at these 3 things, these 3 major areas we're working on to really assess, what do I need? This is the mindset that we want you to have. It's not about spending all of your time here and wasting your training time here. It's about getting the most out of it so you can be more efficient. All right, so now that I've spent a little time there, I'm gonna add these little hamstring curls. Same idea, the first time you do this doesn't feel so good. So I'm pulling that left heel back towards my butt, and I'm keeping mine to keep my joints stacked. And if you really are on that spot, it's not gonna feel so good. You might have to do 2 or 3 different spots to really get that knot out. Just as we did the internal and external rotation, now I want you to add in those ankle rolls. So can you roll your ankle about 5 times each direction? You'll be amazed at how much or how little ankle mobility you have and how much just turning that ankle really matters. Okay, so now I'm gonna go back to my reconnaissance. I'm moving from that hip towards that knee, and I'm looking to see where that shifted. And what's awesome is that IT band has released a little bit, but I am noticing I'm getting it a little bit more on that outside of the quad. So I'm gonna spend a little more time just putting weight there. It seemed to shift medial back towards the front a little bit. And the formula again is 30 to 60 seconds with the hold, add movement, a little bit of reconnaissance, internal, external rotation, a little bit of knee movement. Okay, so I spent enough time on that side, and I'm gonna go ahead and switch all the way over to the other side. I'm not a big fan of spending too much time on that one side. As we mentioned, those positions can be a little uncomfortable, especially if you're new to this or if you don't have your joint stacking down. Again, I'm using my right forearm to help me out as much as possible. I'm crossing that left leg over to help me get stability. And now I'm using that forearm to help me do my reconnaissance. Moving from the hip to the knee, where is it the tightest? You'll also begin to notice that you favor one side versus the other. Or where tightness shows up on one side on the outside might show up on the adductors on the inside. Okay, this one I'm still kind of in that middle area. I've identified that's where I've got the most tension. Again, I'm going to sit here. Use that breath. And I think about exhaling right into that spot and releasing all that tension. Inhale kind of charges up all my energy. Exhale, surrender, relax, give that muscle permission. And I can tell this one is really letting go a little bit just from getting that little bit of tension in the right spot. From here, I'm gonna add that hamstring curl in. Ooh, there goes that pain face again. Oh my goodness. And it also just helps you understand when you flex or extend one joint, what is kind of the reaction, and on both the front and the back side, can you become truly in tune with your body? Can you find, oh man, this spot is really tight. What do I need to do? That's what we want you to identify, is not only where are these areas of tightness and tenderness, is how can you prepare for or minimize their effects? Can you activate what you need to activate? Can you stretch what you need to stretch? And then over time, can you get better? All right, I've done 4 of those little ankle curls, or for the hamstring curls. Now I'm adding in those ankle rolls, or even working on just flexing and extending that ankle. I've had a few little ankle injuries over here, so I'm always mindful to how this right ankle affects the rest of my hip. Once I got that little bit of movement in, I'm gonna go all the way back down that highway. I'm looking inside and out and making sure there's none of other of those positions. I can tell you after about 10 minutes, I already feel more mobile, more rotational. So now we're gonna come back to our left leg, bring your forearms down as if you were into a plank, and you're going to cross this right leg over your left, maybe just a little bit, because the idea is to get as much weight onto your left leg as possible. You can also kind of mount up and bring it to the side. And I like the idea of using it as a trigger point right here, or as a another point to help me roll. And what I'm doing is I'm looking at that inside and outside. My common spot is going to be that medial part of the quad, and then also a little bit of the lateral one is where I was feeling on this side. So can you feel all those different angles? And again, it's not about just, all right, I rolled my muscle, I warmed it up. The rolling is about finding your spot. So look at this weird angle of body position that I'm getting in here, so I can get that spot right where my medial quad meets the outside one. And once I sit there for 30 seconds, I'm gonna add back in those. So can I use my arms and my leg to make the position as easy as possible? An underrated thing about foam rolling is just spending the time on the ground. Getting into these weird and awkward positions, a lot of times when I hear people complain, I'm like, you're tight because you don't move, you don't get on the ground. Humans are meant to roll around, to move on the ground, and we get so comfortable and we get lazy that we don't come back down there. All right, I've sat on there pretty long. Here comes the pain train. Woo, hoo, 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 hoo. And this little hamstring curl on this quad is serious business. As that hamstring is shortening as I pull it up, that quad gets real long, so that rubber band kind of pulls right on that tight spot, and I've got all my weight on there. Now that I've done my 4 hamstring curls, I'm gonna add those little ankle rolls in there too. Same idea, it all starts down there with your ground reaction. Doing a little more reconnaissance. Did I get it out of that spot? Did it move down a little bit? I've got a lot more time that I can spend on this left quad. This sucker is tight, tight, tight. I've been neglecting doing my foam rolling, and I should make the time to go through there. For the essence of the video, I'm gonna move on, but I promise you I will come back. It is always hard to get yourself to start foam rolling, but typically as soon as you do, it is magical. Cue your John Cougar Mellencamp, it hurts so good. All right, we're back in, we're doing our reconnaissance. And my right side typically doesn't get as much of the junk as my left side does. My left side is my dominant leg, my plant leg. It's when I jump off in basketball. It's my plant leg when I throw. It's just a little bit more use. Oh man, but I am in a similar spot on this side. And once I get there, again, the idea is we've identified that area of tightness. I'm gonna go ahead and just sit on there, plank, hang out, breathe. Adding that little bit of hamstring curl. Oh, man. Really is painful. Use that breath again. Exhale as the pain comes up. Inhaling it, it's a little bit easier. Always breathing out, exhaling as it is more challenging. It's not hard, it's not difficult, it's challenging. Oh man, so I'm gonna go back up. This one's a little more hip flexory. I'm gonna add in some more curls right there. Good night. Oh. And again, using your forearms, using that left leg, whatever you can to make your body position stable and so that it's not hurting the neck, shoulders, or other joints. Also taking that little bit of an inside or an outside pat will help you out. Oh man, so that's about the amount of time that I wanted you to spend in the major joints. There's other ones we can do. We'll make another video where we go back and get the adductors and the calves and some of those little forgotten ones, or if you have certain injuries or little patterns that come up, it's a good place to go back. But that's kind of the checklist. Can I mobilize my thoracic spine? Can I mobilize my IT bands in my hips? And can I really loosen up those hip flexors and quads, and where I take a lot of that pounding from running, cycling, stabilizing, paddleboarding, etc. You know, you got to know yourself. So where are those areas that are really tight? What is the most beneficial recovery method to help you get there? And if we add mobility to it, it's also really good to add stability to it. So the last we're going to do is going to combine these joints all together. So let's get in our half kneeling position with the left leg in front. Whether you have a big or a small foam roller, to me it doesn't matter too much. There's benefits. But I'd like you to just squeeze the outside of it and set your shoulders. So that tension in is going to get us out of this posture, and it's going to allow us to get in this kind of dignified posture. Heads with dignity, heart is tall, chest is tall, and we're engaging those lats right here just a little bit. So starting out here, just with those lats engaged, can you move through your ankle and move through your hip? So we've mobilized a little bit. Now can we add this movement behind it so that your nervous system can go, oh, I can do this, and I'm going to download the stability. So we've warmed up that ankle and hip. This is my best range. My neck is relaxed. Chop these arms all the way overhead. And again, can I bring these arms all the way over my head? Woo, the wind knocked me over, almost. And can I keep my rib cage down? Notice I'm not really changing this angle. My shin and torso angles are staying the same. And look, that range of motion gets a little bit better each time. So I think about, if I start with 20%, can I then add 40%, 60%, 80%, 100%? Now that I've got this big range, add the hip hop hooray in. So move side to side. Move through both your rib cage and your hips to allow yourself to add that stability in the frontal plane or side to side plane of motion. This plane is huge because this is kind of your brakes. This is what prevents you from falling down. Nice work. So now we activated some of those muscles. We loosened them up. We added mobility. We're adding stability. That gives us the most ability. Again, starting on the other side, we got our right foot down. We're going to grow roots with those toes, create a strong arch, meaning the big toe is down, the knee is driving to the outside. Setting my shoulders by squeezing that roller. And at first, we're just connecting this lat tension into the roller, driving through those hips a little bit. Warm that motion up. Now we're going to bring those arms overhead. First one, I'm not trying to set any world records, just can I keep that tension out of my neck? Can I create that little bit of lat stability? Rib cage staying down, head with dignity. And each one just advancing. You use more tension softer body.
Bigger range. Same idea, it's about 4 or 5 to each, and then you're gonna add in that hip hop hooray for 4 or 5. Ooh. And then if it feels good to hold somewhere, hold somewhere. Again, it's about you finding that range. We'll come back and we'll show you more foam roll at a future date, but that'll get you started. Go, babes.